Okay, good morning, everybody. All right, thank you so much. Thank you to Pastor Eric and Pastor Lydia for inviting me here. Again, it's my first time, but I really love the worship. Presbyterians are known to be like quite intellectual, but I can tell you that I felt the presence of God, and it's amen. Such a wonderful morning. I was so absorbed in the worship that I forgot what I was going to say already. So, okay, so just as a bit of background, I think Pastor Lydia shared that my background is actually literature. But when I talk to people about literature, they always say, literature is a very difficult subject. You must study Shakespeare, you must study all the classics, okay? But actually, literature is about interpretation. The subject literature actually took over from biblical studies, if you look at the history. It is really about how we can interpret accurately, how we can interpret all kinds of texts. So I even had students, I used to teach, I began my career at a Methodist mission school, quite near here actually. And some of my girls used to tell me that, literature actually trained them to read the Bible. It gave them the skills to interpret the Bible, okay? So I'm going to start this session. Oh, I forgot, the title of this sermon is How to Be a Missional Family, okay? And I'm going to start this, okay, just asking, is it possible to flash the slides on this screen so I don't have to look backwards? Okay, if it's good, then I don't have to look backwards. Okay, now, I'm going to start this session with talking about interpreting patterns in the world, okay? And this is a very important skill. In fact, those of you who are parents will know that when your kids are in primary school, this is one of the basic questions that they learn, right? My girl is primary 4 now, but I remember primary 3, she used to have this kind of questions, okay? So let me ask you, what is the missing pattern? Circle, okay. How do you know it's a circle? Because you're trained to look for repetitions, right? So square, triangle, circle. So you know the next pattern will be square, triangle, circle. You look for repetitions. Now, as you grow older, the patterns become more complicated, okay? So for example, can you see any pattern here? Okay. This is from the US government, published recently about the global average temperature. So one pattern you can see, very obvious, is the blue versus the red. And the middle line is 1940s, which is typically after World War II. All right, which means that the temperature of Earth has risen after World War II. Before World War II is the blue. Temperatures were much lower. Okay, what other patterns do you observe? You can see that last year was the warmest since 1850. And you can also see other patterns, the 10 warmest years, okay, in the record of human history occurred in the last 10 years. So the reality is our world is getting warmer, okay? So another time we'll talk about climate change. But today we're talking about patterns, okay? Now, in Luke chapter 12, Jesus also spoke to a crowd of people who are very good at reading patterns, okay? He told them that, when you see a cloud coming, right, they know that the storm is coming. When they see a wind blowing, they know that the heat is coming, okay? These people were farmers, right? So with a look at the clouds, they don't need all these weather apps, climate apps, anything. They can tell whether storm is coming or rain is coming or heat wave is coming, okay? They could read the weather patterns accurately. Why? Because they were farmers, because the weather was important for their crops and their livelihoods. Okay? Now, we could say that, this is Jesus' time, right? But it's the same for us today. We are trained to read patterns. So if you are in the business field, you can read the stock market trends. If you are a doctor, you read all the test results, the symptoms and so on. If you're an educator, you read, you track your students' records, right? We are trained to read patterns. Now, notice what Jesus says. Okay, he continues to say, you hypocrites, you know how to interpret the appearance of the sky, but why do you not know how to interpret the present time? So he calls them hypocrites. What are hypocrites? Okay? Hypocrites refer to counterfeit Christians. People who say they follow Christ, but they are more interested in the world because it benefits them. They are more interested in reading the patterns of the world because it benefits them. They are not interested in spiritual insight. Okay? The present time refers to kairos, the season that we are in, the spiritual patterns we are in. So we cannot just look at patterns in our career, in the world, or in things around us. We also need to discern what is the spiritual pattern, the philosophy underlying all these things that we are seeing. Okay? So I'm going to start with a framework that we are going to go through. Okay? And I want to say that the missional family must be salt and light for God. And I want to offer 4 practical ways. Okay? Observe, preserve, converse, and serve. Okay? And I'll talk about each of this. So let me talk about observe, number 1. We must learn how to interpret and discern the patterns of the world. Okay? So that's the first one. So what are the patterns of the world? Okay? And then from the patterns of the world, you need to glean the spiritual insight. Okay? So if we think about the world that we live in today, we've gone through what is called many industrial revolutions. The first and the second industrial revolutions were about steam engine, electricity, all these technological changes that changed the world. But a very important change happened, in the middle of the 20th century. We call the third industrial revolution, which is also called the digital revolution. This is when personal computers and the internet was introduced. Okay? Now today, the 21st century, the term is called the fourth industrial revolution. This is the time that we are in. It's not just about personal computers or internet anymore. It's that technology is part of everyday life. Your social media, your AI, right? You live with technology, your mobile phones, right? We are in the fourth industrial revolution. And those of you who have children, we need to be very aware that needs are changing. Okay, I don't know whether you're familiar with this very popular diagram called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Okay, but this is my new updated version. Original, Okay, my updated version for Gen Z and Gen A, okay, the young people. Now, at the bottom, the red color part, physiological needs, the basic needs, it's not food, water, and shelter anymore. It's what? It's Wi-Fi, computer, and mobile phone. You ask any teenager, you go to a camp, the first thing they ask is, got Wi-Fi or not? They don't ask got food or not, all this, no? Okay, that's basic. Then safety and mental health, right? We used to think safety and mental health, family. But you ask the young kid, what is it? It's their Netflix, okay? It's the YouTube. It's their Spotify, their iTunes, okay? Nintendo, I put there, by gaming. Now even I put down there ChatGPT, because ChatGPT is increasingly becoming a counselor. In fact, I can't remember who said it, that in the future, AI will be their friends. AI will be their mental health counselor. Okay, and MOE, the mental health, they have a chatbot, AI chatbot. If as a teacher you have issues, you can talk to the AI chatbot. Okay, so safety, mental health. Now, third layer, love and belonging. My time, we will hang out at Far East Plaza, McDonald's, with friends. Now, where is their love and belonging? WhatsApp, Telegram, right? Facebook, my generation is Facebook lah. Nowadays, it's not Facebook. But Facebook is where you feel you have a virtual community. You can chat with people. Okay? Now going higher, the second layer. Self-esteem. Where do young people get their self-esteem and recognition from? Right? It's the social media apps. Like Instagram. What do they post on social media apps? TikTok, all this. It's about themselves, right? I noticed Instagram is like things like the food they eat also have to take picture. You know, walking up the stairs to a building also need to like video and put up there. I don't know why. But it makes them feel good lah. It makes them feel good. Okay. And then the highest level, self-actualization, which is the level about your identity. You know, your identity is the way you interact with technology, your likes, your emojis, your comments, your sharing. This is how young people feel they have a voice. They have an identity. Okay? So needs are changing in our time. Okay? We need to be aware of these changing needs. Okay? Now, in relation to this, I want to talk about 3 important cultural movements that's affecting our world. Okay? And it sounds like these are terms, but actually you will recognize them. The first is what I call neo-tribalism. The second is postmodernism. And the third is wokeism. And I'll talk about each of these 3. These are 3 important cultural movements affecting our young people today. Let me explain what they all mean. Okay? The first, let me talk about neo-tribalism. Neo-tribalism means that today, individuals belong to tribes. These tribes are often virtual. Okay? Like if you remember the triangle I showed you just now. Many of their communities are on social media, are online and in the WhatsApp and Telegram messaging groups, virtual communities. They are neo-tribal because many of them are temporary. That means they form groups and then they disperse. And the groups are formed based on personal interests, like music, games, politics, okay? The key catalysts are your social media algorithms. So I think we know this. If you have a social media app, if you, like me, you love dogs, you know, then the social media will show you advertisements about, you know, dog food to buy, you know, dog communities to join. So you will find people who are like you, and you will join groups that are like you. That's why it's becoming tribal. We are becoming more tribal, okay? And this has led to the crisis of shared values. What has happened is that the world has become more individualistic. We find people that are like us. We find people that have our shared interests and beliefs. Now, in the past, we used to think that individualism is a Western phenomenon. But statistics have shown that individualism is a global phenomenon. That individualism is rising in every country in the world, especially those like Singapore that are technologically connected. Individualism is on the rise. The second thing is the increase in confirmation bias. Okay? Because we belong to tribes, we confirm our existing beliefs. So I'll give an example. We had the elections in Singapore. So if you are pro-PAP, all the feeds that you see will be pro-PAP. If you are pro-opposition, then all the feeds you see will be pro-opposition and anti-PAP. It's simple, because the algorithms will show you what you want to see. And as a result, this has resulted in greater polarization in society. Now, the second phenomenon is postmodernism, right? And all these movements are overlapping, intersecting. Now, postmodernism basically means a skepticism towards any kind of authoritative truth. Any kind of truth is now treated with skepticism. There's no one truth. There are many, many truths. And there is also my truth, this idea of multiple realities. So let me give you an example. How many of you have watched any of the Marvel movies like Spider-Man, Avengers? Okay, and if you have, you know that in Hollywood superhero movies, there's one common trope, okay, that you see. It's called the metaverse. Have you heard of this term, metaverse? If you remember Spider-Man, okay, no spoilers, but the recent Spider-Man movie, there's no one Spider-Man. There are 3 Spider-Mans. Correct or not? And they all come from different universe, parallel universe. When we watch a movie, we must always think, what is the philosophy they are trying to come up with? Okay? I gave a talk long ago about metaverse. And if you trace this concept of metaverse, it goes back to people like Stephen Hawking and the atheists who say that the universe does not need a God. Because the universe can fine-tune itself. It's possible to have parallel universes. You must always think about the philosophy behind even like fun shows like, Spider-Man, Superman, all this. What is the philosophy they are trying to convey? Now, today, postmodernism has gotten worse, okay? So, for example, look at these 3 pictures. Who is the real Tom Cruise? Which one? 1, 2, or 3? Okay? The answer is none of them. They are all AI generated. So look at how real AI is. And you might have read the news recently, okay? Universities, including NTU, NUS, are grappling with how to test students nowadays. Because the assignments they give, I don't know whether it's from AI or it's from them. What is real, what is false? Now in schools, I'm also very disturbed when teachers encourage students to use AI to come up with something creative, and the student uses other people's picture, other people's voice. And then the teacher praises them and say, hey, that's very creative, you made Taylor Swift say something. Very creative. But actually, what is the value we are teaching them? We are saying that it's okay to use deception. It's okay to use other people's voice, other people's image, and make it look like it's real. What is the value that we are teaching is deception. So we must be careful about this. Post-truth is the phenomenon of today's postmodernism. The symptom of today's postmodernism is post-truth, where truth is not very clear anymore. The boundaries between truth and falsehood has been blurred, and people don't know what is true and false anymore. Okay? So post-truth also means objective facts are less relevant than appeals to emotions and personal beliefs. Right? And the catalyst is deepfake disinformation. And finally, I want to talk about the last phenomenon we are seeing today among young people, and that is the phenomenon of wokeism. Okay? So wokeism means being attentive to discrimination and injustice. And actually, it's not a bad thing. It can be positive. So I always say that it's a very exciting time to be a young person. Because when I was in secondary school, I went to an all-girls school, and all we talk about is boys. We talk about boys all the time. But now you go to a school, right? What are they talking about? And I observe schools all the time. I listen to their conversations. They are talking about climate change. They are talking about, racism. They are talking about very interesting things. And in fact, the United Nations says that youths are more concerned about human rights and the environment than any other generation. So it's more interesting. It's very exciting to be a young person today, okay? Because you are woke, okay? All right. But the problem with woke is what I call the crisis of justice. You may have heard of some of these movements, okay? Black Lives Matter, Me Too, LGBTQ, and I wrote a book about wokeism, and so you can read it up about all these movements. But I want to zoom in on one problem with wokeism. One of the problems with wokeism is that it can narrow your perception. You see, the way you look at the world is like putting on glasses. It colors your lens. So, if you wear the gender lens, then all you see around you is sexism. This person is sexist. This organization is patriarchal. Everything you see becomes colored by this. If you wear the lens of race, then all you see is systemic racism, historical oppression. If you wear the lens of class, then all you see is class struggle. They are exploiting me. There's inequality. Okay? No wonder people often say the woke movement is very angry. It's what I call sad. Okay? They are sad. Sad meaning self-righteous. A lot of people think I'm right. This is my point of view. I'm fighting for feminism. I'm right and they are wrong. It's very self-righteous. Sad. A stands for aggressive, right? You can see online. They don't like another person's views. They cancel and they shame another person. Aggressive. D is disinformation. Disinformation because oftentimes what they see is from a narrow perception. Okay, it's not the whole picture. And finally is disengage. We don't try to understand the other party who is different from us. We cancel them out, right? We shame them, right? We call them out. And so the secular woke movement has become very sad, okay, and angry, okay? All right. What connects the three movements I talked about? Neo-tribalism is about my tribe, my people who share my beliefs. Postmodernism is about my truth and not other truths, okay? And wokeism, the aggressive kind, is about my cause, okay? And what connects all these three movements? What's the connecting point? It goes back to self-idolatry. It goes back to myself, me, myself, and I. And that, I think, is the worrying trend that we are seeing today, that the church needs to be aware of. Self-idolatry, okay? So now I've talked about, as Christians, we need to observe the movements and the philosophy in the world today. Then I come to the second point. We have to preserve, okay, the Word of God. We have to be grounded on biblical truths and Christian values. And the church must be on sound ground, solid ground. As the world becomes darker, we must be sure of our doctrines, okay? Now I want to talk about truth, because truth is core to God's character. And how blessed we are every Sunday that we worship the God of truth. Okay, if you look throughout the Bible, truth is always a key characteristic of God, right? He is the true God, right? The whole thing about Israel, hear, O Israel, worship the Lord, who is one God. It's not multiple gods. It's not multiple truths. He is the one God, the true God. What about Jesus? Jesus is described as full of grace and truth. The famous verse, John 14:6. Jesus said, I am the way. Notice, all this is singular. I am the way, singular. I am the truth, singular. I am the life, singular. How can I be saved? Jesus is the way to salvation. How can I know anything for certain? Jesus is the truth. Right? You can depend on him, right? How can I be satisfied? There's so many things in life, money, fame, power. Jesus is the life. He is the one who will complete you. You don't need children. You don't need husbands to complete you. Christ alone completes you. The word truth in the Bible stands for two things. It means reliable, dependable. And it also means completeness. Completeness. And this is the blessing that we have, right? The God that we worship is dependable, right? Throughout the Bible, in Psalms, one of the key metaphors is he is your shield. He's your protector. He's your deliverable. He is dependable. Okay? He's your deliverer. But he's also complete. Okay? I talked about God, Jesus, the Spirit. Holy Spirit is the Spirit of truth. And what about his people? All of us, the church, are to worship him in spirit and truth. So you must understand, the truth is part of the Trinity. And when we look at AI, when we look at this world that's becoming more open to untruths, half-truths, post-truth, we must return to the truth of God. We must return to the fact that truth is core to God's character. The second thing I want to mention is God's character is also observed in nature. Nowadays, we are so hooked onto our screens that we don't see nature. In Romans 1:20, it says, God's invisible attributes, his eternal power, his divine nature has been clearly perceived ever since creation in the things that have been made. Right? So God's character, his fingerprints are seen in nature. And I want to highlight a few things for us. Okay? Number one, God's character is shown in the very basic core structure of creation. Let's go to the first few verses of creation. Genesis 1:1-3. And do you see any patterns here? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And God separated the light from the darkness. One of the things you might notice when God created the world is the pattern of what I call binaries. Binaries means opposites. So heaven and earth refers to space. Light and darkness refers to time. So you might realize that there are binaries right at the beginning, the core structure of creation. Later on, God said, let's make man in our image, and then let him have dominion over animals. So these are authority binaries, okay? So there's God and man, and then man and nature, right? So these are authority binaries, and it's not for subordination and domination kind of thing. Because if you remember, God told man to take care of the Garden of Eden. So these authority binaries are not about domination, subordination. It's about a caring relationship. And finally, there's also gender binaries. So you must see Genesis 1:27 in the context of the structure of earth that God created. And it's within these binaries, male and female, right? Day and night, land and earth, water and sky. These are the structures of the earth that God created. Okay, what does this tell us? That God is a God of order. It's not a God of chaos. There's no such thing as a non-binary world, right? God created binaries at the beginning of time. And what are these binaries for? Diversity and flourishing occurred within the binaries. The binaries are like boundaries. It's like a frame. And diversity, flourishing. Look at all these verbs. Sprout. The vegetation sprouted. The water swarmed, right? God blessed them and told them, be fruitful and multiplied. There was this multiplication, flourishing within the boundaries that God created. So those of you who think, I can be my own God, I can live my own life, I don't need any structure, I don't need any rules, I don't need to follow God's principles. Look at creation. It is because of the binaries and the boundaries that God created that humankind could flourish. Now then Satan came into the picture, and Satan tempted man to cross these boundaries. He asked Eve, did God really say, that you cannot eat this fruit? Did God really say? So Satan's number one strategy is to deceive you, make you question and doubt God. Satan's second strategy is power. Genesis 3 is when Satan introduced the idea of power into man's mind. Satan said, God knows when you eat the fruit, you will be like him. And Satan introduced to Eve the idea that, I can be my own God. I don't need God anymore. I can be independent. I can be individualistic. Right? And this is the seed of sin. When you are tempted with power, when you are tempted to be your own God, when you are tempted with self-idolatry, this is not something postmodern just happening now. It happened right in the Garden of Eden. Okay? Sin brings conflict and competition. What were two consequences that happened? Look at Genesis 3:16. Right? Because Adam and Eve disobeyed God and they ate the fruit, sin came into the world, right? And the consequence is your desire will be contrary to your husband and he will rule over you. Okay, so what does this mean? There's now an introduction of conflict in the family. There's now power struggle in the family. Let me give you some examples. It's when husbands and wives compete with one another. Who earns more money? Who is smarter? Right? It's these things that come in. When there's power, when there's conflict in the family, remember that's a consequence of sin. Okay? What else happened to Adam? Right? God said, cursed is the ground because of you. In pain you will eat of it all the days of your life, and thorns and thistles it will bring forth. It's no longer the garden with all the fruits and vegetation. Now there's competition. Now resources are not plentiful. It's not all there anymore. They will have to work hard. Resources have become limited, which means now there is competition for resources, which means now within the family there's also anxiety and stress. Will I earn enough for my family? Will I get enough for my family? So all these are the consequences of sin, all right, that was brought in. Okay, so principle number 1, if we want to be a missional family, we need to recognize what sin looks like, and we need to be counter-cultural. Before sin happened in Genesis 2, God created man and woman and said this, a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and they will become one flesh. Okay, I want to zoom in on this word, hold fast. You know what it means? It's such a beautiful word. Hold fast means cling onto. Cling onto your spouse. Cling onto your wife. Cling onto your husband. Don't let them go. Right? There's a lot of wisdom in this word. Because marriage is not easy. Especially in a world where people are becoming more individualistic. You ask two individualistic, self-centered people to live together. It's not easy. You will quarrel. You will compete. Right? You will have conflicts. But hold fast. Cling to one another. Don't let each other go. Right? Because marriage, right, is an example of the covenantal love of God. When you made a covenant with God to your husband, you cannot let him go. You must be committed to one another. You must be other-centric. It's not about your husband or spouse serving you. It's about you serving your spouse or your husband or your wife. It is about other-centric love. And the family in a church must demonstrate this kind of other-centric love. When divorces are rising in the world, if the church, the families in the church can show this kind of care, this kind of clinging on, this kind of care for one another, that is how you will be counter-cultural. Okay? And then you will be one flesh. So guard against dominance, guard against power struggle, guard against competition within your family. It can happen with siblings. It can happen between a husband and wife. Okay? Now, very sadly, this statistic came out actually this week. And it shows that marriages in Singapore is declining. Again, I think this is part of the phenomenon of individualism. I think a lot of young people no longer want to get married. But divorces are also rising. Okay? So as I mentioned, how can the missional family be countercultural? Your family is your mission field. You also serve in the home. Resist individualism. Learn to serve one another. Learn to care for one another. Okay? I just also want to mention that, okay, let me just time check. Okay, that there are repeated cycles of self-idolatry in the Bible. Okay? I talked about Adam and Eve, the first family. But if you look at the other early families like Noah and Abraham, what do you see? Right? There are some similarities. First, wickedness was prominent, right? So this is not something just happening now. Wickedness and sin was already prominent in the time of Noah and Abraham, right? People were great sinners, right? They followed after whatever they wanted to do. There was liberalism, there was sexual promiscuity, there was lust, okay? But I want to also show another important principle. The missional family must pursue God's ways and not the ways of the world. How did Noah and Abraham stand out? What is similar about these two people? Again, I want you to see whether you see any patterns. Look for repeated words. What are two important repeated words about Noah and Abraham? Okay? Blameless. Correct. They were blameless. And then in Hebrews, it talks about how they lived by faith. Right? God told Abraham to leave, and he left. They obeyed. They trusted God. And they walked with and before God. What is the difference? Walking with God is about intimacy with God. Walking before God is about worship. Coming before Him to worship Him. They worshiped God. They walked with God. And as I was preparing this, I felt this was an important thing, right, to emphasize. A lot of times we want to be a missional family, right? We want to go on mission trips. That's great. We want to do a lot of things for God. But we must make sure that this is foundational, that we are blameless. We walk with God. We walk before God. This cannot be compromised. This is foundational. Okay? Because if you do all those things and you don't have this relationship with God, it is nothing. Okay? So, last 2 points, I'll go very quickly, 3 and 4, because my time is up. We must converse. Okay? Very quickly, I just want to say that relationships are weakening. There was this survey by OECD that shows that Singapore is doing very well in reading, math, and science academically. But we are lower than most countries when it comes to children talking to their parents about problems. And the reason is we live in a competitive society where relationships are very instrumental, right? It's usually about, did you do your homework? Did you tidy your room? Have you eaten? Instrumental. But when we talk about the missional family, we must be countercultural. We must change instrumental relationships to spiritual relationships. We must see our children as the imago Dei, the image of God. They are special in His eyes. No matter what is their talent, what are their grades, they are special in His eyes. And we must have spiritual conversations in the home, right? We must talk to kids about our journey with God, about how God is working in our lives. We must have these moments where we share with our kids about God. Okay? So this verse in Genesis 18, when God is about to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah for their liberalism, he says about Abraham, that should I tell him what I'm going to do? For I have chosen him, that he may command his children and his whole household to keep the way of the Lord by doing righteousness and justice. So there are two things here. Command means to teach the children what is right? We need to teach our children the ways of God, but we also need to role model righteousness and justice. Okay, finally I come to my 4th point, which is to serve. So it's not just to observe, preserve, converse, but we need to serve as a family. And I really love this article about from Salt and Light, about this family that brought their children along on a mission trip. And I love to see that video that you showed just now. It's great to see intergenerational mission trips, right? You bring your the elders, the families with their children as part of a mission trip. So I want to talk about this diagram now, because a lot of times our families in Singapore tend to be what I call close families. We are very self-absorbed. We are consumed by our own schedules, right? We send our kids from one tuition to another tuition. There's no time for anyone else. But a missional family needs to be, first of all, hospitable. We need to include non-family members into our space. This means that, for example, you might have stay back after church. Let your kids mix with other kids. Bring other people into your home, right? Bring non-family members from the church, from outside the church, into your home. Be hospitable. Open the doors of your house. Okay? And even more, missional families are ones that intentionally go outside, and as a family, they serve the community and the world. Right? So how can we be that missional family? So this is another example from the Salt and Light article about the migrant worker and how this pastor brought the migrant worker, started with a language class, but brought him into her home, and he became Uncle Santo. The kids started to interact. They became close friends. So how can we be missional families in the world? Okay? The Christian kind of walk that we must exhibit is what is called care walk. The walk is not angry and sad. It's care. Christ-like. We have to show the virtues of Christ. Right? Attune to the needs of others. Ultimately, the kind of justice we show is redemptive. To redeem, not to cancel people. To redeem the world for Christ. And finally, to engage with others. This is the missional family. Okay? I really love this book called Biblical Critical Theory. But this diagram shows that justice is part of God's mandate for the church. To do justice, to love mercy. But we must integrate these 4 things: justice, love, mercy, and truth. You see, a lot of social justice today focuses on one thing, like focus on truth, right? They talk about it intellectually, but there's no action, there's no justice. Then there's people who do a lot of justice, but there's no love, they are angry. And there are people who talk about love all the time, but there's no truth, they are not grounded. The biblical kind of justice integrates truth, love, and justice. And this is the gospel story. It's exhibited in the cross in Christ, right? Christ took on the sins of the world. This is justice, right? He paid the consequences of our sins. That's justice. Because he loved the world. For God so loved the world, he gave his son. And that's love. And Christ is grace and truth. So Christ, the cross, exemplifies this multi-dimensional nature of justice. So in conclusion, church, let us be salt and light. I think I've given various points, but I want to summarize into this diagram. We must observe what is happening, open our eyes wide, be awake to the spiritual patterns and the worldly patterns, and see with discernment. We must preserve Christian values, be grounded, understand the truth of God's word, and be grounded on it. And 3, we must converse with our children. We must teach them these values and a model for them, what it means to do justice. And finally, to serve within and beyond your family. Be an open family to the world. Okay? Thank you very much.